Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 113 or 113, Thursday, December 2nd. December 2nd,
How's that possible?
2021.
How's that possible?
It's December. I didn't even get my snowblower tuned up yet. Actually, I haven't finished my leaves.
I haven't finished my leaves either. I'm not even thinking about snow.
Yeah.
But yep, December is the time to be thinking about snow.
Yeah, just put it out of your head. So did you have a good Thanksgiving, Mark?
I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And you, Scott?
Yeah, it was great. Cooked a lot of good food and all that. Got some salmon going there. Got a turkey breast and the sous vide, and you know me, the usual tech cooking extravaganza.
The sous vide, the Instapot,
yeah, I did that.
Custom creations, yep.
All that stuff.
Me, I had leftover hot turkey gravy sandwiches, which were great.
Yeah, I had a lot of leftover.
Great.
Turkey. That's the best. That's the best. Well, so we had a great number 112, otherwise known as 112, our last show, and we got a lot of feedback on our discussions about ISSA, if I said it right? Yep. And people go, "What is an ISSA? What is that, Mark?"
Well, it's electrostatic sprayers.
Yeah.
Electrostatic sprayers, ESS. And we were talking during our last show about the EPA study that had just been released. And boy, that created an awful lot of feedback from
that's for sure. Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we heard from a variety of people, end users appreciating the feedback. Not that many distributors, because I thought about it afterwards, and you and I talked about it. It's like, I think every Jansan distributor in the United States probably sold somebody electrostatic sprayers, so they weren't too excited about seeing a study that said that they don't work. So I guess a little problematic from that standpoint. But it's self-interest on our part that we've been selling against the electrostatic sprayers since this whole thing started, because we have a vastly superior product at a lower price point. How about that for a product?
Well done. I mean, realistically, the negative of the electrostatic sprayers, one of them was the fact that they were pretty costly. So it was very difficult to equip the entire front line of workers with giving them each an electrostatic sprayer. So, the bullet approach was to create a high-tech yet low-cost entry into the spray theater, and did that with the spray and roll and the mini. And certainly for the same buck, you could equip more than a dozen people. So that was the idea. And definitely when you get down into the other side of the equation in that whole discussion is that there's still a process. It's still process sensitive. So even though the electrostatic sprayers have make claims regarding wrap and whether they wrap or don't wrap, that's kind of what the EPA was saying. They didn't see any wrap. But anyway, you look at it, there's still a process involved where a shadow zone or an area outside direct line of spray ought to be dealt with physically, whether it's treating a microfiber cloth or using a pop-up wiper that's a disinfectant. You ought to be going after the shadow zone. So, consider everything else to be an insurance policy.
Yeah, that and the potential dwell time ramifications. That's part of the process as well. So it'd be great if it did all the things it was supposed to do, but then you got to do it twice. Then, geez, kind of, I don't know, makes you think about it.
I've spoken with a lot of folks that own them and have incorporated a process where they reapply, because they've seen the flash dry, and they're trying to get a 2-minute contact. And so they incorporated that as part of their process in order to make sure they're being thorough. One of the things that we looked at very closely was the micron size of the droplets, and trying to make sure that we weren't facilitating a flash off by having a large enough droplet size, but having a small enough droplet size that we could get a thorough coverage without spraying out of a water hose.
So if you're tuning in on this show and you didn't watch or listen to show 112, go back and listen to it, because I thought it was a great one, and we covered it in a lot of detail. Now, last week was the ISSA show in Las Vegas, and if you were at the show looking for us, we were in D24, which threw some of our customers off because that was not a physical location, because we didn't exhibit. First time in 60 plus years, but the show sounded like it went pretty well, right?
Well, the comments that I got, other than we did have a number of people call us saying, "Hey, Scott, hey, Mark, where is D52-191?" But that was digital, the digital hall. Where's the digital hall? Well, it's not physically there. And I'm making fun of that, but I thought it was pretty cool to have those calls come in. That was pretty cool. But what I heard about the show, I mean, the physical body count was down, lower than past shows. Past shows have had counts of 15 to 20,000 attendees. So these, the counts were lower. And that actually had some pros and cons. I understand that the first day exceeded many people's expectations with the number of people that flooded in through the gates, and that's a wonderful thing. And at the third day of the show, which is normally somewhat of a dead show, was rather really dead that day. But that wasn't necessarily a shocker either. In the midst of all the COVID, not a lot of people were game to be doing heavy duty traveling or interacting in groups. The good news about the show that I heard is because the body count was slightly lower than before. The folks that were attending the show as attendees got to spend kind of more time in the booths and get more attention than they might have gotten in previous years, just because of the sheer volume of people. So I mean, I'm glad to hear that. That's
and if you're an exhibitor from the West Coast or manufacturer located on the West Coast, there's a lot more attendance from that end of the country versus the East Coast. So for those people that are situated in the right place, it was probably a really good show for them, because they had a smaller group of people to deal with, and they were focused on the ones that actually were close by too.
The other things that happened there, ISSA's, announcing some of their new programs. The GBAC program, the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, was kind of front and center, which isn't a shock with everybody preoccupied with COVID. But they actually teamed up and made an announcement. They had teamed up with the Allergy Standard Association, had kind of develops, issues regarding indoor air quality as it relates to allergens. And what do we know about SARS-CoV-2 is that it has a good ability to spread through the air, just like allergens do. So that was, I think, a kind of a cool partnership. And then they've added personnel. Michael Diamond, who's out of Canada, joined GBAC as one of their directors, and that's pretty cool too. He's been very active in infection control for a lot of years. So I think about this show, and we didn't attend this year. Last year there was no show at all. And we kind of did our own broadcast.
From at that point, it was our brand new Bullen Broadcasting studio, but we've been using it since. So a lot of changes. Now next year, great news. First off, it's in Chicago, which is a great location. Historically, Chicago has always been a good location because it pulls from both sides. And then the really good news is the show is returning to what I thought was their kind of better time slot. The show's been going out later and later in the year, just like it was this year. So we're going back to the middle of October, which back in the day, the show was pretty much tied in with the World Series. The end of the World Series was usually held the same week as the show. So we're back in that same time slot. So
well, that's and that's only half the story, Scott. Let's face it. October is your favorite month of the year. For personal reasons.
Yes, I have spent a couple Halloweens, which is my birthday, at the trade show. Not that that's necessarily a good thing, but it is nice. I'd rather be home, but that's okay.
Well, the other thing I think is great about the Chicago location, the fact that it is kind of in between East Coast and West Coast, very easy for folks from Canada to get down from, because Canada generally has a very large attendance at the ISSA show. But Chicago is also the headquarters of the ISSA.
Yeah, true.
And so it allows them to incorporate a lot of resources they have being based there.
Mhm.
So I really expect it to be a, like the World's Fair kind of
Yeah.
show for janitorial and sanitary maintenance.
Well, listen, the hot news is, if I can show this properly, that is
That's a new microbrew available from Adam Breweries.
out of the UK, and they just got lucky because their product, Omicron,
Not to be confused with Omicron.
yes,
Omicron.
a West Coast IPA, and if they're lucky, this will be a repeat of what happened to Corona beer. And those of you that have been watching Jancast before, even before Mark came back on board at Bullen, that was our hit Jancast show. I mean, unbelievable number of downloads. And that was all because people thought that Corona beer had something to do with the coronavirus.
Yeah. And then in return, Corona beer
Yeah.
excelled in sales because it was the word of the day. And then we got sophisticated and we started calling it SARS-CoV-2
Yeah.
and the COVID-19, and the folks at Corona were probably going, it's not really the name of our beer, SARS-CoV-2 COVID. So it kind of went away, but it's good to know that a microbrewery in the UK now has their Omicron beer. And maybe they will experience the same level of success that Corona did.
Yep. So if you're in the UK, and we do have listeners from around the world, go have one and let us know if it's any good. It's a West Coast IPA is what they say.
Well, the other side of that is, I wonder where they came up with the name, right? So
it's been
you and I were hypothesizing over where it might have come from. And so we looked it up, and it's the 15th letter in the Greek alphabet. So, it's kind of the way they name hurricanes, right? You just kind of go down the list. But they skipped a couple. So how's that work, Scott?
Well, one was, as they said, it was too easily confounded with new. That was the next NU. And then what? How do you pronounce the other one? Zai. Yeah, that was not used because it's a common last name, not here in the U.S., but somewhere. I mean, it is a World Health Organization thing, so they've got to cover the whole country. But
they don't want to offend anybody.
That's right. So we got this new one coming, and what's different about it, Mark?
Well, actually, if you've seen pictures of it, compared to SARS-CoV-2, which was floating around everywhere, it looked like a soccer ball with little suckers on it, but this is really different looking.
It's shaped like Africa.
What?
We'll post a picture below. But
it does have kind of like that, like a top shape, and it's loaded with all kinds of little, the sucker pods that stick onto things. So the interesting thing about it is that it's considered to be so much more contagious than even Delta was. And, Delta created that whole secondary shutdown because of its level of contagiousness. And in the case of Delta, although it increased the level of contagiousness, Delta didn't necessarily increase the level of lethality.
Right.
And that's really what the common thought is regarding these variants, is that they go through phases where they try to increase their contagiousness by mutating and creating these big, long suckers and all that. But in the process, they actually are self-defeating because in the process of doing that and increasing their level of contagiousness, they can, in fact, lose their degree of lethality. In other words, lose their effectiveness of, creating death and destruction. So a lot of things that have happened in the past prior to SARS-CoV-2, it's surmised that that's actually what caused them to go away, is as they mutate and try to become more and more contagious, they lose the ability to be lethal. So that the expectation is that this might actually be very good news, not bad news. about this new variant, that yes, it might have become more contagious, but in the process, it might have become far less lethal, which means that we may live with it forever, the same way we live with the common cold.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
don't die from the common cold, but everybody catches a sneeze, you know, once a year. And it's maybe what this evolves itself into, which is not terrible news.
Yeah, no, the really good news is every time you look at the news, it seems they started out going, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. Now it's kind of like, you got to wait a week or two. We'll let you know. So, I mean, I think people were kind of dialing it back quite a bit, which is really good if it ends up being the case. I mean, the general thing is I've heard is, you know, you might have some symptoms, but it's not going to necessarily put you in the hospital and kill you.
Yeah, well, the you know, especially if you've had some degree of immunization and vaccination, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what they're not really sure is if you're immune because you were previously infected, you know, what effect that is. But
Yeah.
I know they were interviewing Moderna about
Mhm.
Omicron or
Yep.
Omicron. Yeah, so Omicron. And you know, there is some concern about whether or not it's mutated to the point beyond of what the vaccination can help. But if
Yeah.
in fact its symptoms are more mild, maybe it doesn't matter as much. So, you know, if everybody catches a cold and nobody dies from it, you know, then
Yeah.
it's not so terrible. And that might be what this has evolved into. But Moderna is actually looking at the possibility of creating a Omicron specific booster.
Yeah.
And so I would expect Pfizer and J&J to go down that same path.
Yeah, I heard on the news last night, they were saying, the Pfizer guy was saying they've already developed these variant forms of the vaccine. So they apparently had already developed one for the Delta and then not really rolled it out. So they seem like they're kind of thinking way farther ahead than we are, at least.
Yeah, well, maybe they're thinking about the fact that it's been documented that pets can spread COVID too,
Oh,
you know.
great. Thank
So
you.
maybe from here on out, we're going to be going, all right, it's a mandate that you have your pets vaccinated for COVID, you know. But apparently there's been a whole bunch of studies that have shown that, you know, if somebody's infected with COVID and they're like cuddling their cat or dog, and then that dog catches it, becomes infectious, and somebody else coddles pets or whatever, has
Yeah.
close contact with that cat or dog, that they can catch it that way. And that's called a zoonotic effect, when it's got the ability to jump from human to animal and animal back to human. And let's face it, you know, this, you know, Ebola and things like that all spurred from the bats, right?
Yep.
So did SARS-CoV-2. So those are zoonotic effects. And the fact that this is zoonotic is not terribly stunning. And in fact, if it becomes more mild in its symptoms, it really won't matter, because half of us probably catch common cold because we're exposed to pets that carry it on their fur. But Scott, the bigger news is, whatever you do, do not carry deer on your back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, what's the stat? 80% of the deer sampled in the various counties in Pennsylvania were.
Well, actually, it was actually various counties in Iowa, but it was Penn State University that did the study. No, I kind of ran down that path because I was thinking PSU and the Happy Valley, and it just got me going.
Happy Valley with a bunch of COVID dudes running around.
So
What's happy about that?
Well, they were saying 33% of all the deer that they tested were like positive COVID. It's like, well, I get why, you know, a human might be worried about hugging a pet, but who's hugging deer? And then it struck us, like, you know, the hunters carrying on their shoulders, get it out of the woods or whatever. And maybe that's the deal. Other than that, I can't imagine how other zoonotic spillover events might occur.
Right.
Because you really don't hug deer that are alive.
I don't know who's even tried to do that.
I don't know.
If they did, we probably shouldn't know about it.
No, but I can tell you that about 15 years ago, the grill of my car tried to hug a deer. It lost. Both lost, the grill and the deer.
Yeah.
So with all that, you know, where we wanted to kind of wrap things up was talking about the N list and whether that's still going to be around and viable, you know. And the EPA extended their EVP policy. That's their emerging viral pathogens policy, which means that the N list is going to be around for a long time. So when we're doing our cleaning and disinfecting, we're still going to be referring to the N list for probably another year, while that EVP policy is in play. The EPA said they'd give everybody 6 months notice before they discontinued it, but it's more than likely that may be in play for a long time.
Well,
Scott,
as a manufacturer of disinfectants, I know we've spent the last probably 3 months or so updating all of the our EPA labels as well as our private brand customers' EPA labels to add in the COVID claim. So the fact that they're extending this is good, but part of the reason they put this in place is they couldn't update the registrations that quickly, but they needed to get out to the world which products are effective. So this kind of goes hand in hand with all the label updates that the EPA is required. So most of ours are done already, but it was a very labor-intensive process for our art department to go through, because every label had 50 different changes to it to be able to add it in there.
Yeah, and then there's the multiple levels of approval of those changes. You know, it's the federal level is kind of obvious through the EPA, but then getting it registered in every single state. Some are pretty quick and easy, and others are arduous.
Actually, I just got one for a product that we sell into California, and I said to the production people, I said, we can't use this label until California approves it, and California is about 8 months or 9 months behind on any of the other stuff we've already submitted. So that means that the new label, so I'm glad they extended the policy on this, the endless policy, because like in California, we're not going to get approval to use the new label that's been, updated for at least until next spring, if not summer, probably. Unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, there's that multi-tiered level of speed bumps that slows down the process of these things rolling out. So I'm glad the EVP was extended. And maybe we'll have more news on that during our next podcast.
So a lot of good data today on this show. So hope everybody found it interesting, and don't forget to go back and listen to the one on the electrostatic sprayers from 2 weeks ago if you haven't. And we'll put the picture of the variant that looks like Africa below the listing on the Jancast page for this week's show.
And then for the record, is it tomato or tomato?
Is
it Omicron or Omicron?
I like Omicron myself personally, just because it's easier to remember. Let's see what 6 months from now, maybe people will be saying Omicron.
Yeah.
You never know, right?
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a great rest of the week. And we will be back in touch in 2 weeks with a new show.
Thanks everybody.
See ya.